Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. We're here tonight to discuss the digital world and professional development, riding the wave. It's nice to see you here, and I hope that I'll say something new, but I know that so many people out there in all educational arenas are flourishing in what's happening today in terms of professional development. So I want to spend a moment saying to each and every one of us that there are ways that we can individualize the professional development of our staffs in Islamic school, and also ways to develop our own personal learning agendas when it comes to the digital world. There are so many trends that are just peaking now that, just looking back, I guess it's been maybe 20 years, maybe less. Yeah, less than 20 years. When I jokingly said to my supervisor at National Louis University that I didn't really think I would need email, that my students were able to reach me by phone. And it's true, they could reach me by phone. But then there was email, and now there's texting, and now the text comes to your, whatever device you're on. So this idea of professional development at your fingertips is really an amazing thing. And to be able to plan your own professional development was a dream back in the 70s and 80s, when we used to sit in huge auditoriums and someone would pick a presenter and we would all be the consumer of a lecture by someone who, had a great talk, but it might be something we just finished a graduate class about. It might be something that we just read a book on. Or it might be that something that our particular school had embarked on a couple years before. So that great speaker in that auditorium with 500 people from a school district, or 5 or 6 or 10 elementary schools, would spend their time there motivating us. But many of us would go away saying, I wish they'd ask me what professional development would be good for me. And so that's something that I never lost sight of, and I'm sure many other people also had not lost sight of over the years. So if we think about the trends that have taken place in professional development, and we think about the examples of what's existing today in terms of online resources, there's no limit, there's no end to what could happen in this arena. So how do we individualize? Too often I hear I'm licensed or I finished my degree. But I have also been in this field and in the classroom since the 70s and never seen a more drastically changing time than we see right now. The best kind of PD really is one that we select for our own personal reasons. So whether we're thinking that professional development would be a degree and we'd walk away with a new license or a new professional standard, or whether we think that professional development is going to help me right now in my classroom. And I know that my own professional development helps me in my own classroom. I teach adults, but at the same time, doing that makes a huge difference when I know what my students need. Last night in my classroom, all of my students prepared something on a particular topic, and then they posted it on Padlet. And we had, a huge screen then of a variety of entries that were unique to each person. So they were sharing something that they had just come across, just learned about. So that personal development that they did, that professional work that they had just embarked on, then became like a poster, like a billboard for every person in the class to see and read what each person had posted. So in a sense, if an entire school took on the idea of managing topics and managing goals and objectives specific to their own school culture. What does our school need? Where does our school need to be? Last time we held the webinar, we talked about the ISTE standards and how to move forward in the use of technology and using ISTE standards as a pedagogy. So now if we think why PD and what does Islamic pedagogy say about professional development? Well, each one of us has to be accountable and reflective. So we personalize it. I say to myself in reflection, what do I need to know in order to have a positive and diverse set of circumstances in my adult classroom so that every person from every racial background, every multi-ethnic background, you know, what do I need to do to make them comfortable, to make them feel welcome? And so I can seek out my own professional development because I reflect and because I plan. I become accountable. And these are factors, these are, you know, part of the standards in implementing Islamic pedagogy. That idea that we need to be engaged in learning at all times. And if that's the case, we're engaged, then we should be constantly measuring our own growth. So this is scalable work. And it's not for the degree. It's not for the license. It's not going to finish. It's going to be lifelong learning from the cradle to the grave. And it's like a sponge. It's never going to be completely filled. You can always take in more. So the idea of being individualized in that way really and truly means that it's enthusiasm in our classroom. It's excitement in our classroom for the very thing we do, and that is learn. We teach and we learn. And so if we think that way, and if we plan that way, and if we think it's Islamic pedagogy, then what PD might we value the most? I mean, anybody could have any different answer to this question. I do belong to professional organizations such as ASCD, such as ISTE. I do go to conferences, and I do attend some of their webinars. I make presentations. Maybe I would value for a period of my life the journals or the reading more. Maybe I would just be searching the websites and watching the listservs. Maybe I would be a consumer of articles that come in my mailbox. So I would go out and I would pick topics and I would plan to receive all the latest information on a particular topic. When I was working with the iPad groups, and it wasn't that long ago when that was brand new, working with the iPad groups, we used to keep live binders of all the sites that were meaningful. And the live binder had tabs. And if you don't make your live binder private, it's public, but you could make it private. So we could then, you know, keep track of the things that we wanted to keep track of. You could also, besides searching the websites, you could keep them all bookmarked, which we've been doing for ages, right? Just like we've been reading books for ages. But we haven't been doing this webinar, this listening and this flexible learning for very long. So making a community, and if you look at the ISTE website that I introduced last time we had this, there are lists and lists, we'll come to a slide in a minute, of regular webinars or podcasts. Now there's something called Podbean, just like Bean, B-E-A-N, Podbean, which is an app that will help you to create a learning event that can then be, you know, used somewhere else. So webinars, listening, flexible learning, signing into iTunes U, Some schools use all their lectures go into the iTunes University U. Of course, the opportunity to be interactive and take a course and get a grade is still there. But the final thing on this list has been around 4 or 5 years that I'm aware of it, called the MOOC. The MOOC is the massive open online course. And we can all, even children, can sign up and learn a topic way ahead of their time. Of course, they're not paying tuition. They're not getting a grade. They're not going to be graded, in fact, on their coursework. But they can consume an entire course for free from MIT, from Stanford, from Harvard, wherever. And this MOOC, this free, massive, open online course and courseware had really gone viral for a while. And then I think it took a little bit of a, back because people want to get a credit. So then we looked at badges, and badging is another way for individuals to receive a recognition for what they're learning. So sometimes we learn and we're not putting anything, no feathers in the cap, knowledge in the head, but not feathers in the cap. And the MOOC is an example of that. For teachers, I think we set ourselves apart, or we set our school apart, if we live and thrive in a culture of learning from the cradle to the grave. And I personally am constantly taking a course, constantly engaged in something. Education Week is a very old friend of mine with many, many opportunities to learn. You can just read pages and pages of current information. You can also be on their listservs. Edutopia is a listserv and a website. The third one here really is a favorite of mine, and it does cost, but it's very cost effective. I suggest this, and I know some schools that are actually sitting down together during their meeting time. They have negotiated with Simple K-12. They pay the fee for an institution, and they watch video and do certain series of webinars that build into full courses. Courses on classroom management, courses on using the Chromebook, an entire program for Chromebook or for iPad, or for teaching and learning with technology. So K-12 can be watched in your pajamas, but it can also be watched as a group. So when I say set yourself or your school in a culture of learning from the cradle to the grave, each learning institution, unlike what I had said earlier about back in the day when I would be a consumer of a lecture that someone else had chosen, if we plan our schools and the direction that we want to go and the milestones that we want to reach, then we can design everything on our own, and there are plenty of places out there to get exactly what we're looking for. I'm sure you've heard of PBS Teacher. An example of PBS Teacher, and a very, very good course, is a $49 course called on storytelling. But I just picked one. There are many, many courses. As you know, from having understood what I've been talking about lately, ASCD and ISTE have a massive amount of information, and you could do every single day and not exhaust either one of those websites watching, whether it's you want to learn best practices in teaching second language learners or vocabulary development, as I mentioned, diversity and welcoming and warm climates for children to thrive. There's no end to what you could watch, and just build yourself a set of what it is that you want to achieve. So when you do that, I also tell my teachers, my future teachers, you must take free journals. You can read them electronically. They're available digitally. Teachingtolerance.org the journal, and tech and learning. These three things are very important to me. I use the journal and tech and learning to manage my own learning on this trajectory of using technology and planning for technology. Right now, some of the biggest things being discussed is artificial intelligence. And I think that we're going to see gaming and learning thrive in the next few, well, not years, months, weeks. Gaming has become a very big and important piece of learning. But just as well as gaming is the artificial intelligence. So then I have the slide here on social media. Twitter and Twitter chats are rated high. In fact, Twitter has been said to be the most used source of professional development. So once a person has their hashtag and decides what hashtag to join, in fact, if you want to look up a pretty big list is under the title Teach Thought. So T-E-A-C-H thought, T-H-O-U-T, I'm sorry, T-H-O-U-G-H-T, Teach Thought. And it's a complete guide to Twitter hashtags for education. So if you just go there, it's a place that claims we grow teachers. And equity, technology, iPad, science. Some of the most popular hashtag EdTech, hashtag e-learning, hashtag iPaded or iPad Ed, CP Chat, Ed Apps. So in fact, if we think just about Twitter for a moment, it can be a place with lots of tweets and really lots of noise in a sense. If you participate at an agreed upon time like we plan to, then you see a stream of tweets, and you also can be tweeting in there and making your comment, but what you take in and what you take away, the message, the connection, the unbelievable number of tools that you will experience and places and people. We need this network to be developed for the Muslim educators. And that's part of what the ISLA is hoping to achieve by holding the webinars followed by the Twitter chat in order to plan the topic and talk about it and then tweet about it and make that next move. So we can have as big a network as there are people. And you have to make a distinct decision about who you will follow, because you won't be able to read everything. You won't be able to stay on it all day. And there are, of course, many Facebook groups besides Twitter and Twitter chats. You can also take the opportunity to pay attention to Facebook. And when you're ready to curate is a very important thing. Where do you keep the resources and the links and the information? For a while, you know, we relied on bookmarks. And that worked for a while. Now most people are using things like Pinterest. I mentioned Live Binder. We also at National Louis, we use something other than that. I'm forgetting the name, but it's not as sophisticated. It's called Porta Portal. So it's, in a sense, it's your portable, personal portal. Too many P's, but you take it with you wherever you go. Similarly, your Google Docs could be a place where you could keep the curating of all of the special and important things that you would like to keep track of. You don't want to get involved in spam, but you need to know what hashtags, and you also need to know what meeting times various Twitter chats were going to take place. And then you just get on and use the hashtag to get to that spot. You can do your 280, what am I trying to say, characters, and just keep sending out your information. So one of the reasons why Twitter is at the top is because it's snappy, quick. It did start out originally with the 140, and I think people really still like the 140 because it limited us. We had to be more effective. So I'm going to kind of wrap up with a few good just for teachers social media spots. Maybe the three most popular are Classroom 2.0, which has actually 80,000 educators that engage through webcasts, conversations, online forums, and posts and topics from the future of education. On the IECN, we've seen lots of conversation about Quran and Arabic, and I'm hoping that we will attract some folks to work towards having regular Twitter chats on these topics that are unique to us. The second one of the, I said 3 top sites or social media networks is EdWeb. And these are started by individual people in the general education world. The third one is Edmodo. I don't know if you're familiar with Edmodo, but Edmodo started in 2008, and it's grown into more than 20 million users around the world. So Edmodo is focused on connecting not only teachers, but students and parents. And here, again, I want to focus us on having an Islamic network and Muslim educators and benefiting us on what we're doing with Quran. How are we getting the message out? How are children embracing their faith, their spirituality? We always hear, stories of weakness and children with identity issues. And so here in Edmodo, teachers can post and monitor student work, so they have a private place, but they are also using social media, so the kids enjoy that. Kids seem to like Edmodo. And you can engage in conversation with your students and parents, and 2 separate spaces as well. And it's an expansive reach. It's very big, and it has many differentiated platforms for students, teachers, and parents. And then there's something called the We Are Teachers Helpline, and that's a group on Facebook. It's a closed group just for teachers where you can share ideas, ask for help, vent, or have a laugh. So I think that those were 3. Of course, I gave you the 4th one, which was the place you could be private with educators on Facebook. Then, of course, there are some for parents only. It mentions also in what I'm looking at here from the ISTE materials that parents have a lot of private groups as well. And perhaps that's a trend that we can push toward when we think about Islamic schools. The connection of science, the connection of math. Just think of what we could do if we were all planning to teach mathematics with the Islamic and relevant to Muslim connection. Here we are coming up to Ramadan, and after that, the Hajj. And when we think about the cube, the Kaaba, it's not a perfect cube right now, but when we think about all the possibilities, the 27th night, the multiplying of hasanat, the idea that we pray 5 times, the idea that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, during Isra and Miraj, went to the highest heavens and came back and negotiated. I mean, all of these ideas, the way that I'm envisioning what can happen if we start our own live binders, for example, on the teaching of Quran, on science and the Quran, on math and the Quran. Then when we look for or share, we'll have all the sources. You know, I'm sure some of you know Susan Douglas and her work in social studies and her work in maps and in India and the seas, the oceans, the continents of the world. You know, if we can put all of the resources that are available to Islamic schools and valuable to us in a live binder and have these electronic resources, and then we begin to use Edmodo to make our spaces, accessible, and plan for being together in learning environments, so that we have this professional learning network, and we know electronically who to go to for each resource and for each idea, and just maximize and think, that electronically publishing materials doesn't have to be a print booklet that has to go out by snail mail. But these journals, teachingtolerance.org, the journal, and Tech and Learning, have been journals that I've read for all of them at least 20 years. And they come in my mailbox, and now they come on my iPad, and I read them either way. And so my suggestion is really that if we think about our network and what we want to do, we need to be riding the wave of the professional development opportunity and building our network. So I always remember that, that the Islamic studies teachers used to say, we don't have materials. They used to say, we don't have books. They used to say, we can write lesson plans, but the other teachers who have their resources and teachers' guides are far more prepared than we are. And that was the academic content, mainstream content subjects. So that's something to think about. We now, in that short period that it was happening early in my career, that we started Islamic schools, but now the Islamic schools are 30 years old. And the electronic and digital world has opened an expansive opportunity for us. And so that's the point of our discussion tonight. Just to review a little bit, there were three things really: how to develop individualize your staff's professional development, the trend in online professional development, and examples. So I hope that that you benefit, and those of you who will watch this later will also benefit, that PD and thinking about Islamic pedagogy makes us accountable and reflective. It makes us take seriously the idea around being engaged in learning at all times. So I will stop there and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the work that we do as Muslims, and to give us guidance and wisdom, and to give us understanding of ways that we can use the knowledge of our time in a way that is beneficial to us. So thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy watching the recording of this as well. Assalamu alaikum.